With the stitched paper samples, there were three main things that I wanted to try in the end, and the first one, it was this picture of the boot, and it was this kind of business here where it was kind of grainy, plus these bits where there were lines and they were going in different directions. So one of the things I did was I used ribbon and raffia on this, which I felt worked quite well. So then I tried that again with a piece of graph paper, and the thing I liked about this is that obviously there were the lines on the graph paper as well, plus the folds. So those were kind of lines in their own way as well as the lines of stitching. Another thing I did was I had some crumpled up rice paper and I sewed into that, and I made the holes first with a sewing machine. So then the holes ended up being kind of part of the texture as well. Another thing I did was to sew with strips of paper, and I made the holes in advance in this one as well. I didn't like this one so much. I quite like the effect of the crumpled graph paper and the holes, but I think the paper strips were just too thick. I wanted to try something different as well, so I made holes in this and then sewed French knots into it, but I really didn't like this because it looked like somebody had a disease. I tried again with it was so they're in the middle of each square. I like that one a bit better, but I don't really feel with the boot that it's that kind of tidy really. So and another thing I tried for that was to sew ribbon into watercolour paper, and although I quite like this, but again I think it's kind of puffy rather than grainy, which was what I was aiming for. And I also tried this, which was kind of, I made the holes again before I started sewing and then kind of sewed randomly. And I quite like the back of this one as well. But I think the ones that went best for this were probably the raffia ones, and the ones where I sewed the wool into the rice paper. Another thing I wanted to do was with the mask that I drew with a feather, and it was in particular the way these lines kind of go here, and there were ones with sort of flicks at the ends, and also the way they start and move off in one direction, and then the others start kind of the other side and go the other way. So what I did there was, one of the things I really wanted to do was try sewing with that iris. This didn't work very well because it was really slippery and it kept sliding out of the holes, and the paper was really thin. So I tried again with more layers of paper, and that did work better, but it still didn't work very well. So I decided this was probably not the best kind of stuff to sew with, but I was determined to give it a go. So I tried instead putting the iris on the paper and then sewing over it with a sewing machine, and I felt that worked quite well, and I like that. I kind of feel it, although it's kind of it's not quite the same as the way the lines on the mask are, but I still feel it kind of conveys that same sort of the kind of movement and stuff. And the third thing, oh no, this was the mask as well, this one. It was getting the kind of sense of the lines going off in different directions. The problem I had with this was that because it was only one layer of rice paper, that it was starting to disintegrate a little bit and there were holes appearing. So it wasn't too bad with the sewing machine, but it was where I was sewing with things that were a bit thicker, like when I tried sewing here with the roving, which was then why with the other bits I sewed over those with the sewing machine to attach them. And the third thing that I wanted to do was with the boot, and it was in particular this bit here and the way the lines go, so they're running parallel with each other. So I tried sewing with wire. First of all, I had wire of different thicknesses. I found this really difficult because it kept twisting, and although the tracing paper it feels quite stronger than rice paper, which was one of the reasons why I chose to use it. It still tore quite easily, and I tried again with some thicker wire, and in a way that worked better because I think it was easier to straighten out when it started twisting, but there was still the holes and stuff. I wanted something that looked quite kind of smooth and crisp and flowing, and it's definitely flowing, but I think the holes in the tracing paper were a little bit of an issue. So I tried sewing with the sewing machine, actually sewing the wire onto the paper, which I really liked that. I thought that worked quite well, and I liked how it is with the folds on the paper as well. And then the last thing I did with the boot was using the folds. So with this one I sewed the string on, so they followed the folds, and then I did a similar thing with sewing on the sewing machine. So I could fold it and then sewed over the folds. I like them both, but the thing I like about this one is that you've got the string that kind of stands out from the paper.